Kiki Classic Rock.
From Scab Harry to the Intellectuals to 57 Men, these early bands led this singer and songwriter to who we came to know and love in the 80s. He opened for groups like Berlin, The Romantics, and The Cars, and also supported Tina Turner for a good part of 1987. They had many of their songs featured in both TV and movies, but one of their songs is in one of the biggest movies of that era, The Breakfast Club. Jack Hues, the lead singer with, the best dimples on the planet of Wang Chung. He is here. Thank you so much, Jack, for joining us.
Pleasure, Kiki.
No, really. Does anyone talk about your dimples?
They do.
Yeah. I have.
It's always an advantage, I seem to think.
I'm sure it was a huge advantage, maybe, back in the day, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Jack, again, thank you so much. Now, everyone is in love with the 80s. It's literally a culture, and you are a huge part of it. How wild is that for you?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy and good crazy, I guess the 80s was a particular time when, I guess through the 60s, 70s, 80s, music was very powerful in people's lives. And I think on through the 90s to a certain extent, but things changed, I think, probably certainly with the advent of computers and the internet. And I kind of think maybe the big thing about the 80s was MTV in many ways, and that's what made it so present to so many people because they were watching it as well as listening to it. And
that's how we got to know and love your dimples.
Indeed it is.
Now, your Wang Chung originator pal, Nick Feldman, got you right out of a magazine. Now, Nick ran an ad in Melody Maker, the magazine that David Bowie said gave him success. So why were you, Jack, originally looking at that magazine, and what drew you to Nick's ad?
Well, actually, my dad was a musician. He was a saxophone player, had his own dance band, and he used to get the Melody Maker every week, and obviously I'd pour through it, reading about these bands I was really into at the time. In the sort of mid-70s, that would be bands like Yes and Genesis, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, those sorts of bands, But after I came out of music college, I knew that there was sort of musicians wanted ads at the back of this magazine. And looking through it, there was this quite big ad with a sort of black border around it, and bigger than all the others. And I thought, oh, well, this guy must be important, So I applied to it and got an audition with Nick, and it was all quite sort of, impressive, I suppose, when I first met him. He had this guy who was a manager, and he had a great drummer as well, a guy called Paul Hammond, and I loved what Nick was writing at the time. He was writing these sort of punk songs, which was the flavour in London at that time. But his songs had all these quite jazzy chords in, because Nick's a big Frank Zappa fan, as well as a whole load of other music. And so I think other guitarists he auditioned found the whole Frank Zappa thing a bit out of their, they were a bit out of their depths with it. But for me, it was very, I knew how all that stuff worked. And but more importantly than all that, we sort of hit it off as people pretty quickly, and we remain friends to this very day, which is something to be said for that, I think.
Absolutely. And I mean, did he tell you at that point why he picked you out of all of those other people?
I guess we've never had that conversation, but I know in interviews he sort of said it was because I picked up all the stuff that he thought was pretty complex instantly, and also I could play. I think we had a similar tastes. We were big Bowie fans, both of us. We were both into the emerging punk scene at the time, but we were also into bands like, say, Sly and the Family Stone. We were into Chaka Khan. We were into Chic. So sort of funk music, and a band called Little Feat, really amazing band, So we had all these things in common. Todd Rundgren was another big sort of passion that we both had at the time. I loved those records that he was doing at the time. So there was a lot of musical common ground.
So we get to Dancehall Days. Now, you originally released this song in 1982 when you guys were Wang Chung. I'm trying to say, it's kind of hard to say, Wang Chung. Now, this was a total turning point for you as you left Arista to go to Geffen, and Wang Chung was the second band from the UK that Geffen had signed at that point. Asia was the first. So now you're a trio, and at this point, you made the move to Geffen. Did you feel in your bones that something good was about to happen for all of you?
Yes, I guess it did feel that way. We had a deal with Arista in the UK as Wang Chung, and that we did an album with them, and it's a pretty good album, but they didn't really know what to do with it, because it didn't. Well, it had a song in it called "Hold Back the Tears," which they thought would be a smash single, and it kind of did okay, but it wasn't as easy as they thought to market us, So they were kind of in two minds about what to do with us. They decided they wanted to do a second album with us, but by this time we'd met a new manager, a guy called David Massey, and David had this, I think, great insight that it would be much better for us to sign to an American label, because he felt that English labels, the English press even, were they weren't so into bands with, how can I put it, musicians who could play, which isn't to say that English bands are full of musicians who can't, but there was something about our sensibility, and maybe it was that sort of funk thing that we were doing. Anyway, he had this sense that we should sign direct to an American label, and I think as well, when I wrote Dancehall Days, I did get this sense that people who previously ignored us suddenly wanted to talk to us, and I'm talking about publishers and other record executives and stuff. I think there's something about Dancehall Days that even in its earliest incarnations, people could hear that it was a hit song, and obviously at that point, everybody in the business is wanting to be your friend.
Yeah, how was that? Had to be crazy.
It was pretty crazy.
I mean, did you?
I remember somebody saying to me in Hollywood one time, "Oh, Jack, if you want a friend, buy a dog."
And that's kind of still true today, right?
It is, even more, yeah.
If you have a dog, you pick up the girls or the guys, whatever. You got it down.
That's true, yes.
Now, when you re-recorded Dancehall Days, you did that at Abbey Road Studios, and from what I incline, you love the Beatles. And I read that the first record you bought was Please Please Me. So what was it like to be in that studio for you?
Well, incredible, really. We were casting around for a producer for this album with Dancehall Days on it, and we met up with Chris Hues. Chris had been one of the drummers in Adam and the Ants, and more recently he produced Tears for Fears' album The Hurting, which Nick and I both really liked, especially Mad World. And the first meeting with Chris, we just ended up talking Beatles for hours, basically, and it was pretty clear from there that we both, we wanted to make Abbey Road the sort of home, the genesis for this album, But yeah, being in that big room, Studio 2, and we were there for, a good 7-8 months, I'd say. Records took a long time to make in those days. Mm-hmm. It was an incredible feeling, and at various times I would just sit in that room and kind of take in the atmosphere and the vibe, and it really was amazing. And a little later down the line of making Points on the Curve, which is the album from which Dancehall Days came, we were working at Air Studios, which is a sort of sister studio in a way to Abbey Road, and we met Paul McCartney at Air Studios. He was working just down the road, and there's a little story attached to that, but I won't go into that.
Oh, please do.
But it was great to meet him. Well, the thing was that we were recording some extra stuff on Dancehall Days. I guess, when you have a song like that, the record company, they keep you at it, in the hope that you're just going to do one more little thing that tips it over the edge, And I think we kind of had it, but they said, try the bass part again. So Nick arrived at the studio without a bass, of course, and Paul McCartney was working down in another studio, and both of them are left-handed bass players, So I said, well, maybe we could borrow one of Macca's basses. And didn't really think anything of it. And then about halfway through the afternoon, this guy walks into the studio with a bass and walked up to me and said, was it you who wanted to borrow the bass?
Seriously?
And it was Paul McCartney, and I literally didn't know what to say to him. I was completely starstruck. And but yeah, Nick plays Paul's bass, I think, on the final version of Dancehall Days. So
No
maybe that was the little bit of
kidding.
that final Beatles influence that we needed to push it over the top.
Because I was going to ask you, you've recorded this already in 82, and you picked it out of everything again. How did you know it would do well that time? But wow.
Well, I guess you don't really, but there was a lot of enthusiasm for it, and I mean, it's still, as a songwriter, you just write songs. I wasn't particularly aware that I'd written something amazing. I liked Dancehall Days when I wrote it, but I was aware that when I played it to Nick, when I played it to David, other people, they were kind of like, wow, this is super cool, So, as a songwriter, I think you're just focused on the next song you're writing, really, rather than trying to figure out what you've just done. And if people dig it, so much the better.
Well, and yes, of course, we all still dig Dancehall Days. But now, Jack, when you wrote that song, though, I, as a teenager, was not really paying attention to what the lyrics said. But now, reading them, what were you thinking about when you wrote that song? Really, what was in your mind?
Yeah. Well, it's hard, because it's like it's not a linear thing. It's not like writing a book, writing a song, if you know what I mean, where you sort of have a story that you want to tell. I mean, some people write like that, but I tend to write in a more impressionistic sort of way, I suppose. The first line that I came up with the song, was I got the sense of the groove of it, and that sort of boing, doing, doing sort of bass line, and I could hear this melody going, take your baby by the hand, and so that was the first line I got, and then I thought, as I worked on the lyrics, well, maybe sort of it should get more and more surreal, basically, as the song goes on, in the same way that when you first meet someone, it's all kind of fairly straightforward and real world, and then sometimes it goes very weird and surreal, So I kind of wanted to capture that really in the lyrics. So in the later part of the song, it's talking about, and in her mouth an amethyst, and in her eyes two sapphires blue. It goes very sort of, surreal is the best word I can use.
Yeah, very Picasso.
Yeah, very Picasso. Yeah, if not Salvador Dali and something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Take your baby by the hair. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. It wasn't intended to be anything violent or anything.
Of course.
Different things.
Of course. Now, there are a lot of misheard lyrics in Dancehall Days. For instance, like I always thought you said, we were cool, oh Christ. Like that's what I thought you said. Okay. However, we were cool on cries. So what is the weirdest misheard lyric you've heard?
Well, that would be one of them.
Oh, great. Thanks. Fantastic.
I can't say offhand. Nick was always on about this song, but I can't remember what the original lyric was, but something about Barney Owl Confusion or something. It's some disco song that he was into. But no, I can't think off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
But now, how did Dancehall Days almost get considered for Michael Jackson's Thriller? Like, how did that almost even happen?
Yeah. Well, I guess, our publishers had the song, and, Geffen obviously had demos of it. And I think Michael and Quincy Jones were casting around 4 tracks for Thriller. They had a bunch of it, but they needed some extra stuff. And they really loved Dancehall Days, So we had a meeting with Quincy Jones, and he basically said, we'd love to try it, but the lyrics are too weird, basically. They're too weird for Michael's fans, anyway. So can you do something about that, And in my sort of arrogance, I thought, well, no, I can't. The lyrics are the lyrics, But I also remember a conversation with Nick where we were sort of thinking, really we need to keep this for ourselves, this is our ticket sort of thing. So maybe we did try very hard to push it, which in retrospect, with a more, what should we say, mature sense of how the music business works, maybe we should have pushed it a lot harder, and I should have rewritten the lyrics till he liked it, But having said that, I think when you're a writer, you have to stick to your guns, and it's important that you sort of do things your way, and on the basis that if you're really feel strongly about it and love what you're doing, then other people will, and it communicates itself in that way. And if you let things get watered down too much, then I think that's a dangerous path to go down.
And you had to be pretty strong at that point to, make that stand and make that decision because it's Quincy Jones / Michael Jackson. And you're saying, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, it sounds ridiculous now. It was a bit like that at the time.
But, it ended up working out for you. That's for sure.
I think it did, in the long run. Maybe not quite as much money, but money's not the important thing, is it? It only makes you unhappy. So.
Oh, you're so right, though. I mean...
I think that is true, but who am I? I'm no guru when it comes to that sort of thing. So.
Who are you? You're Jack Hues of Wang Chung. Hello. Hello.
Thank you, Kiki.
The Dimple Man. Okay, so anyway... 1984, that was an amazing time in music. We talked about Paul McCartney, Bryan Adams, Madonna, David Bowie. You have your second album out, you're on the charts, you hit the ground running, and then you go on tour with the Cars, the late Rick Ocasek and Benjamin Orr. What was that all like for you guys to go on tour with these humongous bands? And you were huge too, but I mean, here you go.
Kids. Yeah, I really did feel like a kid, from a little town in the UK, So they had Heartbeat City was the album, and they had a song called Drive, which was massive, included in Live Aid, and had a huge exposure, and so they were playing massive stadiums, like 60 to 80,000 people a night. And we were the opening act, but because Dancehall Days was a proper hit, most of the audience were there to see us as well, So I'm not saying we could have drawn those sort of crowds on our own, no way. But nevertheless, sometimes when you go and see a band, the support act, everyone's in the bar, and then they come in and see the main act, but everyone was there rooting for us, And so the audience responses were incredible, And I guess I think in those days, I loved recording, and I loved that whole process of sort of creating, if you like, the definitive version of a track, And for me, at that time, playing live, was an approximation of the record, and always a bit of a disappointment, And that was partly to do with the technology at the time, which was quite unreliable compared to how it is now.
Yeah.
So sometimes things would break down, and you were making compromises all the time about the sounds and all that stuff. We were sort of. What am I trying to say here? I think I found it sort of daunting, the whole thing of playing the live gigs, and it was very exciting. But I think I was very sort of uptight, really, about the whole thing, and didn't enjoy it perhaps as much as I should have done.
Because I was going to ask you about, backstage antics, and, people trying to just come up to you and, hey, I love you. I love your dimples. I love you. Like, let's just go in the green room. And, was that happening?
Yeah, to a certain extent. That's all part of it, I think, And, I think I found that pretty challenging, Some guys are well into that, And I'm not saying that it wasn't exciting and flattering and all the rest of it, but I guess because I had a young family, I felt like I had to sort of keep it together in a way, which isn't to say I was a total saint, but I did feel the pressure of all of that stuff, very, very much.
Oh, you had to. I mean, again, like you said, crowds of 80,000 plus people screaming for you.
Yeah, but it was an incredible experience. When I talk to people about it now, sometimes you chat with like younger musicians or whatever, do you know what I mean? And say the stuff that I've done, they're kind of like open mouthed. It's like it is incredible what we were doing. Of course, at the time it seemed like, okay, so this is the next thing we're doing, and now we've got to get onto the next level. There's always the next mountain to climb, if you know what I mean. But looking back on it now, it was an incredible time.
Because it's so different now, right? I mean, those times are gone.
Yeah.
When you really, really think, when you think about it, I mean, the stadium tours and the music, the record sales, that's all behind us. So you were in the thick of all of that.
I think we were at a very good time. There was the record business was thriving. It was, they owned the means of production, so they could really, filter things and control it all. And a lot of people are quite negative about that. But of course, it worked very well for us.
Yeah.
We were, promoted heavily by Geffen, and we could play and we could deliver. So when it came to doing that, we were pretty good.
Now, Dancehall Days got Wang Chung nominated for Best New Artist at the MTV Music Awards in 1984. The Eurythmics won, but you were still nominated, which is so cool. Now, the Cars, who you were touring with, they won Video of the Year for You Might Think, and you were on tour with them. Now, this was also the same awards ceremony, as I recall, that Madonna did Like a Virgin, and she was in your category. So what was that like?
Well, I remember that was the awards took place at Radio City Music Hall in New York City, and it was a very kind of starry event, and I do remember sitting there, and our sort of, they played Dancehall Days, on the nominees are sort of thing, and I suddenly thought, shit, what happens if we win? Do you know what I mean? I haven't thought of anything to say. Or,
so you seriously didn't?
I hadn't thought about it at all, really.
Oh, my
it was just,
gosh.
So I guess, thank God we didn't win. But yeah, I that sort of is the measure of, we weren't blasé, do you know what I mean? But it's like, I think we were just not aware of quite how big it all was at the time, if you know what I mean.
Wow. Really, I mean, do you sit down now, today, and look back and go, holy crap, like that was big?
Yeah, I do. Sort of when I think about it, I think, we really tasted the big time, as they call it, and although maybe, the fact that we never really sort of like, how shall we say, had massive success meant that our feet remained on the ground, and in a sense we were able to enjoy it in a slightly more objective way, rather than getting hit by some tsunami of, fame and stuff, which I know a lot of people find very hard to deal with.
You seem very down to earth, and even, again, I didn't know you, and but looking at your videos, you just seemed, I don't know, like you were still, like you said, grounded. Yeah.
I think both Nick and I are pretty grounded people, and that counts for a lot, really, especially in terms of friendship and all of that stuff. But I think in terms of, having a life that sort of has some kind of linear consistency to it, so yeah, I'm pleased that we sort of tasted all these things but weren't overwhelmed by them.
Right. Now, it was your first time being in America. Was there an artist or group that you got to work with that you were looking up to back while you were in the UK and you were so excited to work with them? There were lots of American artists that we loved,
I suppose in terms of working with American musicians, that sort of came a bit later when we were recording in Los Angeles, when we worked on Everybody Have Fun Tonight, but maybe that's getting ahead of ourselves a bit. But I recall that Saida Garrett, who actually wrote Man in the Mirror for Michael Jackson, on Thriller, she was one of the people we worked with, and I just loved working in the studio with her. Her voice and her sort of natural life-enhanced way of looking at everything was just incredible. She's a great person, great singer, and I certainly learned a lot from her.
Oh, and another huge group at that time was Journey. Did you ever get to work with them?
No, I didn't actually, no. I mean, with Everybody Have Fun Tonight, the producer was Peter Wolf, and Peter had been in Frank Zappa's band, and got to meet Frank Zappa one time. And he also knew all those guys, who were sort of either in Frank's band or Miles Davis's band. They were really great musicians. Vinnie Colaiuta was one of the drummers. He played on one of our albums, and we got to work with some great kind of great musicians, top of their game kind of guys.
Now, you were also mentioning earlier, I think it was Band Aid or Live Aid. I'm surprised that Wang Chung was not a part of either.
Yeah, so am I. I can't remember why. We were doing something else. I seem to remember that there was a possibility of doing it. but I don't know whether we were on tour or we were sort of doing a TV, some other thing, or recording something. I really can't remember. But for whatever reason, we didn't have time to do it. Which again, in retrospect, is one of those things we should have realised that it was a massive opportunity.
Just a little.
So again, that sort of floated past us a bit. So.
Now, 1984, again, that was just a big, huge year for you. You had 3 children, like you said, at home.
Yeah.
And you have said many times you're a very private person. You like being able to go home and to escape the fame. Were you really able to do that, Jack?
Yeah, I was actually, and that was enhanced, I think, by the fact that all of the fame, for that word to encompass everything, was going on in America, and my wife and kids were all here in the UK. So when I got back here, I wasn't, not that I kind of had to have security or anything when I was in the States, but I was much more recognized there than I was here. So I could go to the supermarket and, go on holiday and stuff and not attract crowds of people and stuff. Whereas in the States, sometimes you would get recognized, and I mean, it wasn't crazy, but it was more, you were more like, felt like you were Jack Hues or Wang Chung there, do you know what I mean? Whereas at home I was just dad.
Dad. Just dad. What are your kids like when your kids look at everything that you've done? I mean, what do they say to you? Like, Dad, really, Dad, you were on MTV.
Yeah, they're very proud. Still very proud, I think, and they were proud at the time, I remember they came over to the States, when would it have been? It was around the time of Everybody Have Fun Tonight, and my eldest son, Harry, he would have been about 8 years old, I think, at that time, so old enough to remember it now, and he said he remembers being picked up at the airport in this limousine, and they were driving up Sunset Boulevard, and one of the blocks there, that's, I kind of guess, a sort of 20-story building, had a massive kind of blown up photograph of me on the side of it to advertise Mosaic, the Everybody Have Fun Tonight album. He said he'd never forget that, like how kind of weird it was to see that, and I can imagine it was very weird for him. So,
Dad's on the side of a building, let's write a song. I mean, let's just write another song.
Yes, exactly.
Now, 1985, another humongous year. You guys were just riding that wave, but now you're in the movie soundtrack space, and uber famous director William Friedkin, he did The Exorcist, The French Connection. He wanted Wang Chung to score the film To Live and Die in LA because he said that you guys stood out from the rest of contemporary music. What an honor that must have been for you guys.
Huge honor. Yeah, to this day, I feel very, very humbled in the sense, that he felt that way about what we were doing, And, it's right to say, we were riding the wave, but the wave had got fairly difficult at that point because we were, as you say, Points on the Curve was technically our second album, and we had sort of plenty of material for that, but when you come to do your third album, you're running, scraping at the bottom of the barrel a bit, so we were trying to write new songs. And, I liked what I was doing, but the record company were wanting Dancehall Days again, basically, and of course, as an artist, you can't do that. You can't just do another version of the same thing.
Right.
We were sort of back to the drawing board in a sense. Effectively, we decided to take a few months out and try and write some songs. And I always think that the worst situation for any writer is to be under pressure to write hit songs. It's like they come when they come. You can't force it.
Right.
That's my sense anyway. But anyway, in the middle of this rather difficult time, I literally got this phone call out of the blue from Bill Friedkin. His office called. I was actually at a friend's house, and in those days, of course, there's no mobile phones and stuff. His phone rang, and he picked it up and said, "Oh, it's for you." Gave me the phone, which was very strange. And an American female voice said to me, "Will you be at this number in half an hour? Mr. William Friedkin would like to speak with you." And so I sat in this guy's flat while he went off and did some teaching, I think. And I had this hour-long conversation with Bill, as I now know him. And we chatted about music, about soundtracks, and he talked about the song Wait, which was a track on Points on the Curve. And he talked about how he was using that as a temp track. So when they would finish shooting for the day, he would look back at the rushes, they call them, and play, just have Wait playing in the background. And he said, that's exactly the atmosphere I want in the movie. So what I want you to do is take your band, Jack, and go in the studio and record an hour of music just like that.
Oh, my gosh.
So little did he know that my band was just me and Nick and a drum machine. But I leapt at the chance, I just said yes to everything. I was so keen to do a movie soundtrack. Initially, Geffen were a bit against it because their sense was, no, you've got to write this hit song, and doing a movie soundtrack was just mucking around. It's not, you won't get a hit song out of that. So they reluctantly gave us a week to do it, and we did the whole soundtrack apart from the title track. We did the whole soundtrack in a week.
Oh my gosh!
And we did it without seeing the movie as well, which again in those days there was no internet to be able to just watch it on YouTube or something, or just send clips across.
Right.
We had to wait for the videos to arrive, which took 3 or 4 days. By which time we were well into recording, and in fact I didn't really want to look at the film because I thought if I watched the film I'd get knocked off course, Because I remember Nick sat in a room and watched it, and he sort of said, "Oh, the movie's great, and this is perfect what we're doing. Just keep going." So that's what we did, and we sent off the soundtrack stuff, the instrumental stuff, to Billy. He called us up in a couple of weeks and said, "It's brilliant. Come over. I want you to have a look at a rough cut of the film." And he flew us out to LA. I remember it was the first time we flew first class, and that did feel great. And sitting with him and watching the original rough cut of To Live and Die in LA was definitely one of the high points of my life. I think I was going to say my professional life, but of my life generally. Yeah, it was a really amazing time.
Wow, that is really incredible. And it's just funny, Jack, how you said 1985 was kind of a tough year, and it sounds like the pressure that you were under to produce. You got to produce. We don't care what, you got to produce. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I admire artists who can rise to that pressure, time and time again, and come up with the goods. It's hard, really hard, and I think, if you are a sort of creative artist, I'm not saying, sensitive soul and you kind of, that pressure's difficult to deal with, but there is a bit of that, that, you want to expand and develop, and I've been very fortunate in my life to be able to do just that, really, to go through a lot of different types of music and different phases of interest in music, and have outlets for all of that stuff, But when you're in the sort of height of commercial fame, then you become, in a sense, a product that is defined in a very precise way. And if you step outside of that is not acceptable. You have to stay within the bounds of that. And I found that very difficult. Yeah.
Indeed, very difficult.
So
in that sense, To Live and Die in LA was a tremendous release.
What was inspiring you at that time to come up with that kind of music? Like, what did you have to do to get that inspiration?
It's a good question. I think I was always, punk was the big thing when Nick and I met. That's like sort of 1978, 79, and Wang Chung was a sort of new wave band, which was the sort of the wave, the undertow, as it were, coming back from that sort of punk, very upfront thing, and it was a certain sort of style of music. But we'd both grown up in the early 70s. When we were kids, we were listening to bands like Yes and Genesis and the bands I mentioned, and also, some of the sort of jazz fusion stuff like the Mahavishnu Orchestra. So I always had this sense of, wanting to write longer form tracks, and I think, when I was trying to write the second or the third Wang Chung album, I was working on a track that was a bit like Wait, but I wanted it to be, I was trying to condense it down into a pop song, and when I had the conversation with Billy, and he said, we need an hour of music, suddenly I was in the position of needing to expand it to be as long as I could make it, and that sensibility, I think, chimed well with me, But I guess that's never really returned, the long-form tracks, until more recently when I've been making these solo albums, which I think are very connected up with the kind of progressive rock that I was listening to when I was a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, The Breakfast Club. I mean, cult classic, huge. I still watch it over and over today.
Yeah.
I just do. And Fire in the Twilight is your song on that movie soundtrack. Yeah. So when you did Fire in the Twilight, was it before the movie came out? Had you seen it?
No. With To Live and Die in LA, obviously we were scoring, the incidental music, as they used to call it, that's sort of playing under the drama, Breakfast Club was very much about just recording a song. They wanted the Wang Chung sound, I guess. And the song was written by a couple of writers, Steve Schiff, can't remember the name of the other guy. And it was Billy Idol's producer, Keith Forsey, that's it. And so they had written the songs, and they kind of wanted these different bands, obviously Simple Minds and us. And so they sent us the song, and I kind of thought the song was kind of okay. It was called something else then. And so I sort of changed the lyrics and changed quite a lot about it, actually. And but they were cool with that, But what was interesting about working on that was that Keith Forsey was producing the album, and he was Billy Idol's producer, So I was used to working with Chris Hughes, and then, who's very meticulous, very English, very, Beatles influenced, quite intellectual, quite sort of considered in everything that he did. Keith Forsey was sort of like kind of the studio with a glass of brandy in one hand and something else in the other, and just go, yeah, sounds great, go off and down the corridor and work with some other band, you know what I mean?
Oh my gosh.
It's a completely different thing, and it all needed to be done in an afternoon,
Oh my
but that again was really exciting, and I recall that session. It was done very quickly, and much more rock and roll. But that was a good thing to be doing.
But how about after, when the movie came out and you saw how big it became? Like, did you? I mean, do you still watch it now, or?
Yeah, I have watched it reasonably recently, actually. Yeah, we did a sort of 80s cruise thing about 3 years ago, and they were showing all those movies that were kind of on the house system, as it were. I've watched a whole bunch of them, and I thought Breakfast Club held up really well, actually. And we did do a video for Fire in the Twilight. Molly Ringwald was in that, and so we got to meet some of the cast. It was good. We felt a part of that movie.
Oh man, Jack! Like, just to say you're a part of the Breakfast Club really is so iconic.
Yeah.
Now, in October of 1986, you guys released your fourth album, Mosaic. You've been talking about, and that spun off the so fun song "Let's Go." And of course, Everybody Have Fun Tonight. Now, Let's Go again, super, super fun, but Everybody Have Fun Tonight. What did you put into the writing of that song, which you wrote with Nick and Peter Wolf, that made it become, I mean, literally, it is the perfect pop song?
Yeah. Well, I think having done To Live and Die in LA and The Breakfast Club, it was kind of like, okay, you guys have had your fun. Now write that bloody hit song. Geffen was very patient with us, really, So we were kind of, it was do or die, really, So Nick and I used to meet together at his flat in North London, and, both of us would have ideas, we play them to each other, and, he'd play through some stuff, and I usually would be going like, no, I don't think so, no, I don't think so. And he played this idea, Everybody Have Fun Tonight, that lyric, and I said, that's cool. And he was shocked, I think, but zeroed in on that one, And I took it away and sort of wrote almost like a sort of ballad, really, like when I'm sort of, I guess I sort of default to like 3 or 4 different templates, and one of the templates is Hey Jude by the Beatles, So it's like, medium tempo song, long outro. And I was thinking, this chorus, Everybody Have Fun Tonight, would just be a long outro, and it would all be a bit melancholy in a way, is how I saw it, because, how can you have fun tonight in this terrible world?
In this terrible world back in the 80s, come on. Everything was good then.
So we, played it to David and and they, we did a demo, and it was, people sort of liked it and saw potential. And when Peter Wolf heard it, he was like, "It's a smash," you know what I mean? And he could hear it as a much more up-tempo party song, And he was really into this lyric, "Everybody have fun tonight, everybody Wang Chung tonight," which I had sort of sung as a sort of ad-lib, really, and I thought I'll change those words at some point, but that would just be good enough for now, And he was like, "No, that's the chorus," It's like, no, we've got to come up with something better than that. But he had a real vision for it, And I think the energy of that song is pure Peter Wolf, basically. He's a larger-than-life character, a fantastic guy, And he really drove us on that song and got the best out of us, I think, on that,
But, and I'm sorry, I have to go back to that whole thing of just, you got to write a hit song and you better do it now. Like that. See, to me, like I'm not an artist like you, but I don't know. I would have that whole wall. Well, I'm not going to do it then,
Yes, that's kind of what you do when you're an artist. Especially me, I'm a bit contrary. Well, I'm contrary, very contrary. If I've got to do one thing, I'll do everything but that thing, And some other things I do are pretty good, but if you want that thing, you're going to be disappointed. So I think the guys at Geffen must have been tearing their hair out of it. But they got Everybody Have Fun Tonight, which was, again, it was an iconic record in its way, and it gave them the hit they wanted.
And still is iconic today. Has love ever influenced you to write a song?
Has love ever influenced me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, all the time. Yeah.
Like what? I mean, have you?
One of the main drivers, I think.
So is that something that drives you today for your new music?
Yeah. Love and the loss of it, I think, are very powerful drivers. So the album that I did 2-3 years ago, well, actually less, it feels like ages ago, but it was just a couple of, it came out in 2020 in March, so I was recording it for about 9 months, 6 months before that. So a lot of those songs are about loss and about the intensity of love, so I think the power of that album comes from very strong feelings, very strong emotional feelings, which is what gives it a sort of authenticity, I think.
And then we get to what's love got to do with it, really? Because then you go on tour with Tina Turner. Sorry, I had to. It was just right there in the palm of my hand. So, what was it like touring with Tina Turner? I mean, the incredible Tina Turner.
Yeah, I mean, we were back playing 60,000, 80,000 people a night. She really kept herself to herself. She was never really around. She would arrive in a limo, like literally 5 minutes before she went on, go and do the gig, come off, in a fur coat, get back in the limo and go and disappear, But one evening she stayed, and I think maybe a couple of times she came a bit early and watched our set and stuff, and we hung out with her a couple of times. But she was a very private person, and so mainly we were with her band had quite a lot of English guys in it, as I seem to remember. So we would, hang out with them, and they were good to us. When you're a support act, it's quite easy to be kicked around a bit. It's because they've got all their gear, they want to use the whole stage, they maybe have an elaborate stage setup sort of thing, and you end up with like about a foot of stage right at the front, and,
oh wow!
But they sort of made room for us, and I get that, initially, especially because they were English, there's a bit of that competitive sort of like thing going on. You kids, you don't think you're born, sort of thing. And but I think after a couple of gigs, they saw that we were good,
yeah.
And so they were more sympathetic, and they gave us a bit of the stage. And again, I think Everybody Have Fun Tonight was a big song, and people love that record. And I think people who came to see those gigs, they would have had a good night.
Yeah, I mean, what a bill. Wang Chung and Tina Turner, holy moly, for 1987, really the most of it.
Yeah.
Now, your fifth album, The Warmer Side of Cool, that was released in 89. And in 1990, Wang Chung split up and you and Nick went to go off and do your own projects. Jack, how is it to really, now you're stepping back from all of it? Every last little bit of it. What was that like for you?
Well, I guess it was a tough time. I think Nick and I, with Everybody Have Fun Tonight. It was a hit song, but it was a sort of party record in many ways. Well, not in many ways. It was a party record, and I think Wang Chung, essentially, as I saw it, wasn't a party band. It was a sort of art rock band. It was Dancehall Days and To Live and Die in LA, and I'm not saying Everybody Have Fun Tonight was completely alien, but I think there was a lot of pressure. It became okay, so now do another, party record. The Warmer Side of Cool was really quite a sort of proggy kind of record, really, progressive rock sort of record. And but I think on that album, Nick and I were pulling in very different directions. Nick wanted to, continue the. I don't think he sort of wanted the party thing to go on necessarily, but he wanted, I guess, to be a sort of English Bon Jovi almost. And probably he'd be mortified that I think that. And I think I wanted us to be, I don't know, like an American Pink Floyd or something. So we were pulling in different directions.
Yeah.
And I think it became very difficult for us to work together around that time, and that's why we split basically. And also, I think the music business changed, or not so much the business, but the bands changed, So by the end of the 80s, you had, Geffen signed Nirvana and Guns N' Roses, and that was the flavour. It was either that, the sort of grunge direction, or hip hop was huge, and some, bands were pursuing that. And Nick and I were doing neither, really. We were still writing these sort of kind of slightly elaborate sort of guitar songs, And so we were just, the fashion changed, and we didn't change with it. And just like, when the 80s hit, a lot of 70s bands just disappeared because they couldn't adapt. Likewise, I think we weren't adapting, and I felt I just needed to really sort of step out. I remember feeling like that it was on this sort of carousel. That was just going way too fast. I just needed to get off for a while and take stock, which is effectively what I did.
And how about your friendship with Nick during that time? Were you still connected, or were you completely separated?
Well, I think we sort of probably took a year or so, something, to sort of. I think when we did we both did solo albums. I did one for Columbia, and he did one for Epic. So both part of Sony at that time, there was no contact when we were doing those things, But I think after the dust had settled, and I think we both needed to do that. We both needed to sort of get something out of our systems with that, And then Nick started working for record labels as a sort of A&R guy, and I remember him calling me up and saying, do you fancy doing a bit of producing or just helping out on some sessions? I've got this band that I think you'd like, and so I did that. I worked on 3 or 4 different bands for him, and I also worked with Chris Hues. We remain friends and are still very close friends to this day. And Chris called me up one time and said, "Come and play a bit of guitar on this album for me." And it was supposed to be just a couple of days at his house in Bath, and it ended up being 3 months working with him on this thing. So all sorts of projects came out, but Nick and I sort of, as long as we weren't sort of in the studio trying to agree about the next Wang Chung single, we got on fine, and do still get on fine,
Yeah, you can tell. You can just tell you have a brotherhood there.
Yeah, I see Nick as my brother, very much so. Yeah.
And in 1997, you both released a greatest hits compilation, and you and Nick, you've done, like you said, the 80s festivals. So what was it like decades later to go out and perform these hits, as another person, really?
Yeah. Well, it was great in the sense that, people are there to see you. They already decided they like it. Back in the 80s, there was always the sense that you were being judged, if you know what I mean. You were like a new band. People were checking you out, whether it's the audience or the reviewers or whatever, And it felt like there was a lot of pressure all the time, whereas more recently doing these 80s shows, there's no pressure at all, other than to perform well, which is, we can still do.
Yes,
so,
you can.
Yeah, it's a lot more relaxed, It's fun. It's fun like it should have been for me. You know, I mean, I emphasise this uptightness. I had a great time as well. You know, 90% of it was great time, but there was this underlying kind of almost anxiety, if you like, you know, that I recall at the time, and now there's none of that. You know, it's just it's fun, you know, and the audiences are great, and some of the gigs are great too. You know, they vary, but some of them are really good.
Now, how about any cool stories you can share with us from a fan, you know, that you said that really made you go, wow, like I did that for this person?
Yeah. Well, I guess one gig I always remember from these more recent gigs that we were doing was in Milwaukee. They do a thing called Summerfest, and there's like lots of different stages and all kinds of bands, you know, from really big bands to there's some new bands and stuff. And we were on one of the stages. It was in this sort of tented area, and I remember we sort of came on, and the place was kind of like about a third full, you know, just people sitting around. But as we played, it kind of gradually filled up with people, and I remember on that occasion we ended the set with Dancehall Days, and I can remember the response to it was just incredible. I mean, it was packed, this tent, and there were people standing outside, and obviously there was some sort of word-of-mouth thing going on, you know. And for once in my life, I was really present to it, you know, rather than thinking about the next thing I've got to do or whatever, you know. Yeah. And I remember standing right in the middle, at the very edge at the front of this very high stage, you know, and listening to the crowd, you know what I mean, and listening to the clapping and the shouting and the screaming and really taking it on board, you know, that this song really means a lot to people, you know, and this is what you've achieved, you know, and just how so many people would give a huge amount to have that experience, you know, and there I was having it and being in the moment with it, you know, that was a very powerful experience.
That is so, oh my gosh, that's so amazing, because you know, it's weird because here it is, I'm talking to you, I grew up listening to you, and to even just hear your music now, it makes you happy, you know, and I know it must have to be really strange for you sometimes. You've sang the same songs over and over again over the course of, like I said, decades, but you know, in another sense, you're touching all of us as you do that. Yeah.
I mean, it's an incredible feeling, you know, that these songs are part of people's lives, part of a sort of legacy of rock music, whatever you want to call it. You know, this music that we all grew up with, and that was such an important part of our lives, you know, and that is now in a different place. I think, you know, certainly in the 80s, you know, I always assumed that music would just keep going and going, and there'd be new bands, and you know, it would never come to an end. But I'm not saying it's sort of come to an end exactly now, but it's very different now, and the whole kind of place of music in people's lives, it's not the cutting edge that it used to be. You know, the technology, I think, has got to a point where you can pretty much do whatever you want. But you know, I think in the 80s, a lot of the sound of the bands was driven by new technology. You know, new synthesizers that you could play live on stage, you know, new guitar sounds, new, you know, digital recording, CDs and stuff was very much a part of the 80s, that kind of slightly brittle sound of things, you know. The technology was really in the forefront and always was, I think, in popular music in that sense. And now I feel that technology really serves maybe, you know, video games or, you know, online stuff. That's where it's at for young kids, you know, and they don't have that same intense experience with music, which I feel is a shame in a sense, because I think music is a very particular kind of communication. It's very deep in your heart, you know. It's not like watching a movie or playing a video game, you know what I mean? Both of those things can be immersive, but they don't touch you in quite the same way that a song by a band that you love can touch you, you know. So I feel very privileged that I was part of that. You know, that when I was a kid, I was growing up with all of that and was very sort of affected by the music around me. And then I got to be a part of it and make a contribution to it.
And then you got to work with Tony Banks of Genesis.
Yeah, I worked with Tony, yeah.
I mean...
Tony, you know, Genesis were one of the bands that I listened to all the time when I was a kid, you know.
Again, another story for you is that you've talked about Genesis, a few times already since we've been talking, and you got to work with him.
Yeah, and he's Tony's I tend to sort of make these friendships with people, and we work together, and then we just sort of meet up. I don't see him super often, but I went down to see him. When the lockdown was a little easier here in the UK, I drove down to see him and hung out with him and his wife and his daughter Emily, and just had a lovely time with him. And like you were going to visit any friend. So for me, Tony is that guy. But there's a few people I've mentioned that I've worked with him. They're kind of just open mouthed. It's like, Tony. It's like they're incredulous. But of course, once you've done a bit of work with them, and we're all people, and especially in the music business, I think you're all trying to do the best thing, and get it as good as you can, and it's so yeah, it's a cool way of. But I've been very privileged to get to know the people that I've got to know.
Oh my God. And it's so cool I'm talking to you. But anyway, like just so cool. You have no idea. So everybody have fun tonight. You turn that into Everybody Stay Safe Tonight. You recorded this Fun Takeoff with Valerie Day of New Shoes, who you guys had worked with, in the past. And you had to do that virtually. So what was that like for you, Jack?
Yeah, that was fun. I guess it came through. There's a guy who sort of does our merch, and he's a great guy, Greg. He's a great sort of entrepreneurial kind of guy, and he sort of came up with this idea that it was a sort of project to, for the lockdown and stuff. But obviously, it had to be done virtually, But yeah, in a way, it wasn't a problem. I went back to we actually did a remake of Everybody Have Fun Tonight in the mid-2000s. There are sort of business reasons for doing that. I think most bands do if they can. And so I went back to that remake version, which is a pretty good facsimile of the original in many ways. And tweaked it a bit, and then actually re-sang the whole track. I just kind of got into it for whatever reason, and so I was just in my sort of main living area, which is in my house is a studio. Really, I don't have a living area like most people have.
There's no living, just recording.
There's just music. It is a bit like that. Yeah, and so I recorded my bit of it, and then sent it off. Valerie did some stuff on it. Various people brought it. In fact, I think she sent her vocals to me, and then I sort of mixed it all together and mixed the track and mixed stuff. And then my daughter was staying with me, and her boyfriend Alex has got quite a nice camera, so he shot the video for me.
Oh.
Yeah, and my little grandson, I'm a granddad these days. And my little grandson Raphael, he's right at the beginning of the whole thing. There's a little boy who's sort of standing there, just presses the button on a keyboard and holds up a sign.
Oh, that's so cute.
And there's Raph, so who I dote on. He's great. So
the video is just so
project.
fun. So fun. But again, you had to, oh my gosh, I'm doing this virtually. Like, hello.
Well, that's not a problem. It's kind of okay. I'm not a fan of sort of like virtual gigs. If you know what I mean. I've not done any kind of live streaming type stuff as such. Well, various reasons for that. But I think you really can't replace being in the room with a live act. That's what you want to be doing.
You're absolutely right. And the Jack Hues Band, you're going to be performing 4 dates I saw in the UK in September in honor of your newest release, Electro-Acoustic Works. That comes out in September, really, really close by. And your latest album, Primitive, I love that your first choice, by the way, is an orange vinyl record. It's not a CD. It's a record. Yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool.
Yeah. I think the packaging, the cover and everything on because one of the great things about, issuing things on vinyl again is that you get to sort of really work on the artwork again, which was never, it was important on CDs, even less important with streaming, of course, but But the real way to enjoy album artwork, I think, is on 12-inch vinyl. So I've designed this album package. I think people are going to really love it. Actually, there's a painting by a really dear friend of mine on the cover. He also did the cover to Primitive.
Oh, nice.
And so he's done the cover to Electroacoustic Works, and which I love. And he's got a gatefold sleeve, and I think when you open up the gatefold, you're going to be like those old 70s records. The gatefold was always
Loved it.
What's it going to be inside?
Yes.
And it's a really exciting thing. Well, it is for me anyway.
Well, you know what? So many people are just into vinyl now, and like I was into it when it was a thing, and it's just resurged itself, which is so. I think it's just amazing.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing. It's a great way of, you listen in a different way with vinyl. I think. I buy quite a lot of vinyl. Actually, there's a great shop here in Canterbury where I live, and I quite often go in there, and the other guy who runs it, Nick, I say to him, so what should I be listening to? And he'll say, well, this is good. This has just come out. And I buy a few things, and I have a kind of nice turntable here, and I just, I don't have a TV, and I don't watch movies and stuff very much, but I do listen to a lot of music, and vinyl is a great way to just really focus, and it's still, I think, the best medium certainly for jazz and pop music, for want of a better word for it. Classical music sounds probably better on CD in many ways, because of the noise. There's lots of quiet bits in classical music, and I don't like listening to a lot of surface noise.
Yeah.
But in pop and jazz, obviously, it's just kind of compressed, so you don't have those problems. And especially jazz sounds amazing on vinyl. I think the thump of the bass and the sizzle of the cymbals, it just sounds beautiful.
It does. You're absolutely right. Any plans for you guys to come to the U.S.?
Yeah, we're hoping to come over next year.
Yay.
It's not going to be possible this year, I don't think, and that's just because there's just too many variables. If you know what I mean. We've got variants of this bloody virus.
Right.
But, the variables are booking plane tickets that you then have to cancel, and all of that stuff. For us to get to the States is quite a big deal, really. So we decided that we're going to leave it until next year, by which time I hope we'll be really on the other side of all of this stuff. And I hope that we can play in as many places as we can get to, really. And that will be me and Nick as Wang Chung. And if I can do any gigs with my solo stuff, I would love to do that as well. But I know it's a little more kind of complicated to work out from a business point of view. But yeah, we'll be in the States, and I miss the States terribly.
We miss you.
During the 80s, we spent a lot of time there, and especially in Los Angeles. I was probably there at least 6 months in every year from probably 82 to sort of 90.
Wow.
And I was visiting every year after that, and lived there for a little while, for like about 18 months. And so going back there is a real joy, and I remember we went and did some gigs, probably towards the latter, just coming up to the pandemic. Actually, we did a couple of gigs, one in Los Angeles and one in, I forget where, just Sacramento. And that last little stint in Los Angeles, I just loved it, and so I've missed it a lot, being stuck in the UK. So I can't wait to get back.
Well, it can't be that bad, because see, you look at it as being stuck in the UK. I've never been, and I want to go before I die. So
it's great, but you can have too much of a good thing.
Yeah, no, I hear you. You don't know what you got till it's gone. Yeah, I get it.
You're right. You got that right. Yeah.
Now, you and Nick, again, you're friends, you're compadres, you're best buds. Is there one thing that the both of you have said to each other, you know what, there's still that one thing we want to do together as performers?
It's a great question, Kiki, and nothing springs to mind particularly. I'm sure there's lots of joke answers,
and that's okay.
Together, sort of, but no, I think one of the things we love doing, I think, is sometimes when you're doing these 80s shows, you're on these bills with a bunch of other bands, and you get to do your 3 hit songs, sort of thing. 3 strikes and you're out, sort of. And some of the time we do Ballet or Fire in the Twilight, or tracks from some of the newer stuff as well. So that we can do like maybe a sort of 45-minute to an hour set. And I think that's something that we both love doing, and that sort of stretching out. And so I think if we got to a space where we could do a proper tour like that, play some nice theatres, I think that would be something that would please us both.
Well, I have a nice theater for you here in Rhode Island, so I'll email it to you.
Okay.
It would be perfect for you guys. So another question, do you still have the chunky white sweater you wore in the Dancehall Days video?
I don't, no.
You don't have it? What did you do with it, Jack?
Well, I'm not even sure. I think it was just sort of a bit of, provided for the shoot.
No.
That was a shoot that we did with Derek Jarman. And I remember doing kind of shopping in this sort of thrift shop in Camden Town. And I did buy a suit there that I do still have. But the white jumper, I don't know what happened to that. But
dang it.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Somewhere, I guess.
Well, hopefully I find it at a thrift shop one day. Boy, wouldn't that be cool?
Well, that would be very cool.
So, Jack, what is the one thing you learned from becoming a music icon for an entire decade?
I guess, what can I say? I learned a lot of things, but I think music is an incredibly powerful thing, and I guess because of the curve of my life with music, so when I was a kid, I had the good fortune that my dad, A, bought me a guitar when I asked for one, and B, insisted that I have proper lessons, from the age of 8, so I got to sort of learn music, the sort of technical side of it, if you like, from quite a young age, so it wasn't difficult for me. I just sort of absorbed it, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think maybe studying music at university, I know that's not for everybody, but for me it was, it opened up my mind to the whole scope of music, from Bach to Mozart to Schoenberg to Thelonious Monk to Todd Rundgren, and to me it's all music, and that kind of, as well, growing up listening to the Beatles, who were very eclectic, really, in their tastes and on the kind of music that you got on a Beatles album. What would today be considered lots of different genres on a Beatles album. But of course, what was powerful about them was their artistic identity. And so I suppose, to try and answer your question, I got that chance to sort of create an identity, and I got the chance to sort of see, the upside of that very powerful effect that you can have with it, and also the downside of it, in the sense that you sort of get slightly boxed into a corner by it as well, So maybe the upshot of that is just, get to, somehow you've got to get to be yourself, and you've got to be free, So.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Oh gosh, Jack, thank you so much. And I just want to let everybody know that you can be followed on Facebook at Wang Chung the Band, Instagram at Wang Chung Band, and online at wangchung.com. And, we don't know how many times you've actually performed Dancehall Days. Everybody have fun tonight. All of your amazing music.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, Jack, that your music is woven into so many people's lives. The music you gave to us is appreciated and loved to this very day. You are so awesome. And Jack, I wish you the very best of luck on the release of Electroacoustic Works. And thank you so, so much for sharing your stories with all of us. And we wish you all of the very best.
That's really great, Kiki. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. And thanks for, preparing a great interview. I appreciate it.